Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies. May I ask everybody to take their seats because the session is about to begin. So please take your seats. We're a little bit late starting and we will get started now. And may I invite all our esteemed speakers to join me now on the stage, and we will begin the session. Thank you very much indeed. So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Day 2 of Prespa Forum Dialogue. My name is Joan Hoey, and I'm the Director for Europe at the Economist Intelligence Unit. I'm delighted to represent the Economist at this wonderful event, and it's an honor and a pleasure for me to moderate this session, which is devoted to the economic integration and economic prospects for a region that I've covered as an analyst for more than 30 years and about which I care very deeply. I'd like to thank Minister Osmani for inviting me to the event and to congratulate him and his wonderful team at the Ministry for staging this really excellent event for a second year. 65 years after the Treaty of Rome, is Europe fully reconstructed and integrated? The answer is clearly no. There is unfinished business. The main focus of our discussions at the forum so far have understandably been on the politics of integration and accession, given the geopolitical and security challenges facing the region and Europe as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But, of course, there is an economic dimension that is very important and deserves attention. And that's what we will focus on in this session, because it really is a mistake to separate politics and economics, or the economy and security. Achieving faster economic growth and integration and convergence and raising the living standards and life satisfaction of the citizens of this region is a sine qua non of political stability, social cohesion, and indeed peace and security. A failure to deliver on those things, a failure to deliver integration and faster growth and improved living standards will perpetuate inequalities, increase vulnerability to social unrest, and erode citizens' commitment to democracy and the market economy. The major challenge for the region is how to achieve faster convergence, economic convergence. And this morning we'll discuss whether the EU accession process and its related projects are helping the region to achieve catch-up growth, and whether the various regional cooperation initiatives, such as the Berlin process, Open Balkans, are delivering results. The format of the panel, of the session, is in two parts. We have two panels of 5 speakers. Each speaker will speak for 5 minutes, and that will allow time for questions and discussion and dialogue. So, without further ado, it's my great pleasure to give the floor to Prime Minister Kovačevski. Thank you very much.
Почитувани дами и господа, почитувани колеги, почитувани министри, Ваши Екселенции.
Colleagues, ministers, Your Excellencies, friends, associates, and distinguished representatives of the press, it is my great honor and pleasure that we are all here at this year's significant international conference, the Prespa Forum Dialogue. The pleasure is that much greater because we are here together with my colleagues from the region, heads of states, ministers, ambassadors, high representatives of the European Union and the US, and also representatives of international organizations. The session that opens today's agenda at the Prespa Forum Dialogue is 65 years after the Treaty of Rome. Is Europe fully economically reconstructed and integrated? This topic is of particular importance, especially in today's conditions of world turmoil, and it underlines the importance of integration of Western Balkan countries that naturally belong to Europe. I would not like to use my speech to go back to the past because precious time has been lost, especially when it comes to the Euro integration process of North Macedonia. I prefer to speak of the present and future plans. In the Balkans, there are politicians that enjoy talking about the past and history, especially those in the neighborhood, and those are the easiest topics to be discussing, as when you talk to citizens about history, you're not promising them anything, actually. It is the hardest to speak to citizens about economy, because it is then when you made promises and when expectations for a better living standard among citizens are increased. I will speak about the future and everything that we, in cooperation with our countries in the region, our strategic partners, have been conducting in strategic means to improve the standard of citizens. I will place my emphasis on three main aspects concerning these topics. First, harmonization of the national legislation to the acquis, implementation of standards and structural reforms. Second, the Open Balkan Regional Initiative and its economic benefits. And third, integration of the region in the EU and within the European single market. Regarding the first aspect, I would like to underline that our determination for EU membership is clear since the very beginning of the country's independence. We've been a candidate country since 2005. The Stabilization and Association Agreement was signed 21 years ago. The signing of the SAA is of great importance for the development of the relations between the Republic of North Macedonia and the European Union at that time. It brought a new quality to our relations, and it envisaged reaching association within no more than 10 years in 2 consecutive phases. Although this time perspective was not met, the SAA remains the single legal framework regulating the relations between both parties while contributing to the political and economic stability of the country, consolidation of democracy, and the rule of law. We established a formal framework for political dialogue on both bilateral and regional levels, a free trade zone with the EU, and at the same time we secured economic, social, educational, scientific, technological, energy and cultural cooperation, as well as cooperation in environment and environmental protection. The Stabilization and Association Agreement shall remain in force until the Republic of North Macedonia becomes a member of the Union. We still have not commenced the negotiations, and of course this is due to the challenges that have hindered our European integration path. However, we are still here today, still on the same path, because to us there is no alternative to EU membership. To us, EU integration is a question of the acceptance of the highest Western democratic values and commitment to fulfilling the European standards of operation in all segments of society and within all institutions. One of the obligations arising from the association was to harmonize the national legislation with the acquis, as well as to implement it, especially in the first phase when it comes to the internal market, with special focus on competitiveness, intellectual, industrial and trade property, public procurement, standardization, accreditation and conformity assessment. The European Commission issued 4 positive consecutive reports to the Republic of North Macedonia and a 45% harmonization of the national legislation to the acquis. In some segments, we are either ahead or on the same level with certain countries that have already started negotiations. Our legislation is significantly harmonized in areas of the internal market, customs union, and tax regulations to gradually approach European standards and gain maximum benefits in the operation of companies. In line of creating economic policies within the economic dialogue with the EU, we are preparing the economic reforms program in form of a strategic document. This document is prepared for taking part in the process of economic and fiscal monitoring of EU member states, i.e. for involvement in the European semester for coordination of EU's economic policies. The program is prepared under the joint economic financial dialogue. As part of the mechanism for a social economic dialogue focusing on the priorities and reforms in the area of the labor market, employment, education and social policy, we are preparing the program for reforms in employment and social policy focusing on 3 priority areas: labor market and employment, human capital and skills, as well as social inclusion and social protection. Furthermore, the country is preparing a smart specialization strategy as an all-encompassing model for sustainable economic growth based on the industry's capacities, science and society that should be connected to the existing strategies for competitiveness, innovations and research and development strategy. North Macedonia is meeting its obligations arising from the energy community and transport community while investing great efforts in improving energy efficiency and the use of renewable energy resources. The country is focusing on all areas of the environment to achieve the objectives of the Green Agenda, sustainable development, as well as balanced regional and local sustainable development. The new EU enlargement methodology adopted in 2020 is the newest and most recent effort to put the economic criteria in the first row of the EU accession process. The formal integration of the economic criteria in the fundamentals cluster of the EU accession negotiations, meeting the Copenhagen economic criteria, is one of the main political priorities in managing the overall process of forthcoming EU negotiations. Using this approach of the fundamentals cluster, the progress of the candidate countries regarding the fulfillment of the Copenhagen economic criteria will be one of the key areas that will direct the overall dynamic of the negotiations. Hence, all our efforts in the forthcoming period will undoubtedly be directed at future adjustment of our system for economic advancement, not only because we have obligations towards the EU, but for ourselves. We will partner with the business communities to create policies, all with a view to find the best solution that will be in the interest of us all. We have renounced a lot. We have made difficult decisions for EU and NATO membership, all for a better future for the citizens. We became NATO member state. Due to one blockade, the European Union is not delivering on its promises, although there is strong support by the member states, for which I am truly thankful. We continue our work on the Europeanization of the overall system of the state. We are implementing the democratic and social values at home. We are part of the European family and we share the same values. With regards to the second aspect, I would like to say as early as this moment that we see the clear and reasoned benefits brought by the Open Balkan Regional Initiative in terms of free movement of capital, people, goods and services. Recently, at the Open Balkan Summit that took place on June 7th and 8th here in Ohrid, I hosted the region's leaders. This clearly shows that economic benefits and well-being of the citizens and economy are a priority, not only for North Macedonia, but also for the region. All Western Balkan countries are welcome to join the initiative. Open Balkan and the advancement of the regional cooperation within the Berlin process are aimed at providing greater economic growth. This is the precondition for stability and prosperity. Open Balkans offered us a platform to talk to each other and to agree on shared projects and means of action for the improvement of our shared future. The potentials for economic revival of the region are necessary. It is a precondition for further preparation for integration into the EU's internal market. This is a great initiative, however, it cannot be an alternative to the EU. Open Balkan means improvement of the competitiveness, new investments, infrastructural connectivity, greater market mobility and development of the businesses throughout the region. This will mean a better standard and quality of life for all our citizens in the Balkans. Open Balkan offers a market not of 2, but 12 million citizens and more. And this means potential of the region for more investments and economic benefit. This regional association, I believe, brings us faster to the third aspect I mentioned at the beginning of my speech, and that is the integration of the region into the EU and the EU single market. The very fact that all our economies are most directly dependent and related to the European Union speaks largely of the importance of the market and the reinforcement of the economic connections with the EU for each country individually and the region as a whole. The EU is the most important economic partner. 80% of our foreign trade exchange is with EU member states. 80% of foreign investments also come from EU member states. And this is a percentage that, together with the UK, amounts to more than 90%. The region's integration in the EU, in the single market, is of utmost importance to us, but also for the business community. 2 years ago, at the summit in Sofia within the Berlin process, the Declaration for Single Regional Market was signed to achieve greater regional economic integration and to make one step toward the EU single market. Also, the Green Agenda Declaration was signed. It is necessary to intensively effectuate and accelerate all processes, especially having in mind that we are living in conditions of the greatest world crisis, post-pandemic period, and military aggression over Ukraine. This made serious tectonic shifts and divisions across the world. It is necessary to work in the interest of the citizens, the economy, and the region's development to achieve economic progress. 65 years after the signing of the Treaty of Rome, on which today's European Union was founded, the need to increase unity in the Union, to deliver the promise of a united, unified, and economically strong European Union with a fully integrated Western Balkans is more than clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Prime Minister, for that really comprehensive overview of your government's actions to date and the forward-looking plans. If I may ask you follow up with one quick question. The region is facing major economic headwinds as a result of the war in Ukraine, mainly in the form of very high inflation, especially food and energy inflation, which is affecting this region more than many others. And that's going to have a negative impact on household spending, household consumption, also on business investment, and then ultimately on growth this year and into next year. Can you just tell us a little bit about what your government is doing to mitigate the impact of the crisis and support households and businesses, and do you plan to do more?
So thank you for the question. It's very valid and it's a very relevant question. First, I have to intervene in your question as such. When we talk about inflation, yes, all the countries are facing the highest inflation after the Second World War, and compared with other crises, it's again higher inflation. But I would not say, because we always want to say that Western Balkans has all the worst KPIs, always, in every field. Then I must say that now there are countries, members of the European Union, that have at least 7–8% higher inflation than the countries in the region, especially the ones from the Baltic region. As a country, we have done everything what was needed to address the crisis. So we have started this not only this year, but even last year, because due to the increased energy prices on the European markets, we immediately undertook measures which are directed towards preserving the standard of the lowest income citizens, as these are the ones which we first had to address. And the second was measures to keep the liquidity of the companies in order to preserve the working places, the jobs, and in order to keep the basis and the substance for further economic growth after the crisis. At the beginning of the year, we had a comprehensive anti-crisis package comprising of over 600 million euros, with which we are subsidizing the electricity for the small consumers, practically all the residential consumers and the ones which are in business but are practically doing care of children, schools, and similar. On the other side, we provided numerous instruments of low interest credits, of guarantee schemes, and other related, I would say, financial products, which are helping the energy transition of the companies in order to be able to cheaply finance implementation of renewable energy sources on in their companies. And also we intervened on the market with measures which are directed towards stopping price shocks for the customers, for the residential consumers, especially in the field of food prices and energy prices. Here I must stress another very important dimension, and this is the lack of energens, the high prices, and also the lack of food and the very high prices of food. The regional cooperation and the direct communication between the leaders in the region proved that the Balkans can be a place where we can cooperate and where we can help each other. So I can only recall to March and April, where we had, I would say, daily communication with the President of Serbia, with the Prime Minister of Albania, with the Prime Minister of Bulgaria, with the Prime Minister of Greece. And the reason was to ensure uninterrupted transport and trade of all the strategic and necessary food products in order not to have shortages in the region. It gave results, because if we see, in all the countries, there was no food shortage or energy shortage even for a day during the winter. We had only in Albania probably 1 day of sunflower oil missing on the shelves in the stores, but immediately North Macedonia made a decision that we will export the needed quantities for Albania, which proved that price does not matter when helping the first neighbor is at stake on the other side. So from this perspective, I am saying that individual measures by the countries, it's always better when they are accompanied by a good and open communication with all the neighboring countries in the region. And also, the Balkans is not only the countries which are, let's say, part of the open Balkan, but the Balkan is a wider region. So that is why on the last Southeastern Summit, European Summit in Thessaloniki, just 2 weeks ago, I invited the Republic of Turkey, Greece, and Italy to join the Open Balkans initiative as observers at first point, in order to be able to increase this regional cooperation and also to get closer the citizens and the businesses together, because only this mutual cooperation can increase the GDP growth rates over the ones which we have as an average in the past 20 years. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, that's, I think, really quite consequential, because this crisis will deliver an asymmetric shock. So it will affect some sub-regions and some countries more than others. And yeah, we did see that some countries are more exposed to the possibility of food shortages, and Albania is one of those countries. So the fact that this initiative, whether through Open Balkans or bilateral initiatives, can address some of those problems, that's quite encouraging. We're now going to hear a message from the Commissioner, the European Commissioner for Enlargement, Oliver Varhelyi, who has prepared a video message for the forum. And I think we can show that now.
Honorable Prime Minister, honorable ministers, distinguished guests, it is a great pleasure to address this year's Prespa Forum dialogue. Unfortunately, I cannot be in Ohrid today. Therefore, please let me share some thoughts through this video message. These are difficult and challenging times for our economies. First, we were facing the COVID-19 pandemic, and this year we were hit by Russia's military aggression against Ukraine. But the consequences of the war are visible beyond Ukraine and the entire region. Increased food insecurity, spiking energy prices, and financial turmoil are challenges we are facing globally. Let me assure you, the Western Balkans remain our priority. This is the reason why we have included the Western Balkans into our policies to mitigate the current gas and food security crises. The Western Balkans will benefit from Repower EU to reduce dependence on Russian fossil fuels, for example, by participating in the EU energy platform for voluntary common purchase of gas, liquefied natural gas and hydrogen. We have also included the Western Balkans in the European Food Security Crisis Preparedness and Response Mechanism to coordinate food security. However, our main instrument remains the Economic and Investment Plan for the Western Balkans, which will mobilize up to 30 billion euros over the next 7 years. The plan could increase the region's real GDP by over 3% until 2027 and will help to close the development gap with the EU and speed up integration. The implementation of the plan is in full speed. We have already endorsed the first 21 flagship investment projects of the plan with an overall total investment value of 3.2 billion euros, with 1.1 billion euros in grants coming from IPA funds. We believe that with the acceleration of the Economic and Investment Plan, we are moving in the right direction, strengthening connectivity and making our economies greener and more digital. This will help to reduce dependency on Russian fossil fuels and counter disinformation in the region. The plan will also give greater opportunities to youth, women and disadvantaged sectors of society to make our economies and our societies more resilient. Our efforts do not stop here. We are already working in close cooperation with our partners in the region and with international financial institutions on identifying new mature projects that can bring a host of opportunities for people and businesses in the Western Balkans. Our regional cooperation with our Western Balkan partners is a geopolitical and geostrategic choice of the European Union. The Western Balkans belongs to Europe. The leaders of the European Union have unilaterally reaffirmed the EU's explicit support for the European perspective of the Western Balkans. Our initiatives to support connectivity and the green and digital transitions in the region, and our commitments in the area of political and security cooperation are perfect examples to that. Today, as we celebrate the 4th anniversary of the signature of the Prespa Agreement, it is important to underline that as Greece and North Macedonia could overcome their dispute and settle it with a common accord, we expect Bulgaria to step up its efforts and do the same. I am certain that today's discussions will provide many ideas how to move forward together. I wish you a very successful exchanges throughout the day. Thank you.
I would now like to give the floor to Prime Minister Ana Brnabić. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Esteemed Prime Minister, dear friend, esteemed colleagues, guests, it is a great honor and a great privilege to be in Ohrid once again this year. And I will try to be as brief and straightforward as possible. On the topic at hand today, 65 years after the Treaty of Rome, is Europe fully economically reconstructed and integrated? I think brief answer, in my view, would be no. If and when the Western Balkans becomes fully integrated into the EU, I think then the answer could be yes. And when we talk about Western Balkans and the European Union, again, I think we should stop using the word enlargement and start using the word encompassment. Because when we talk about, for example, now Ukraine and Georgia, other countries that we talk about the candidacy status today and the decisions on the candidacy status, I think that is when we talk about enlargement, furthering European Union towards the east. In terms of the Western Balkans, it is indeed encompassment, because we are surrounded by the European Union and members of the European Union. So it is only logical to receive the Western Balkans into the European family of nations as soon as possible. It is politically the right thing to do, economically the right thing to do. It is also strategically the right thing to do, and I think it should be done sooner rather than later. For our sake, but for the EU's sake as well. And I think at this point in time it is equally important, this should be equally important on our agenda as well as on the EU's agenda. Therefore, I would like to use this opportunity and this forum to once again invite our EU partners to start negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania as soon as possible. Again, that is the right thing to do. It is also important for us as Serbia, because the advancement of the whole region towards the EU is extremely important for the regional security, for the security and peace in the region, for the stability and for the prosperity of the region, political as well as economic. So we give, as Serbia, we give full 100% support to all of our partners in the region to proceed with negotiations at greatest possible pace. This also includes, obviously, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Now, on the economic front, I would say that for Serbia, the two key utmost priorities are the cooperation, economic cooperation and collaboration with the European Union, and the economic collaboration with our partners from the region. Why? Well, a little bit more than 65% of our trade and investment is with the EU, and about 17% is with the region. And this makes up 82% of our trade and investments, making the EU plus the region the most important partners for Serbia, our economy, our growth, our sustainability, and sustainability of everything that we are doing right now. So, again, I think leaving perceptions aside, I think it's clear that the EU and the region is where our heart lies and where our interests lie, both politically and economically. Now, to simplify things, if I need to focus on two things to foster greater economic cooperation in the region, and that with the EU, certainly one is the connectivity agenda as defined within the Berlin process. So building highways, high-speed railways to connect people, connect economies, and enable the Western Balkans or the southeast part of Europe to be as well connected as possible. The second focus is the Open Balkans Initiative. On the infrastructure front, we have built the highways to North Macedonia and to Bulgaria, Corridor 10. We are currently building the highway to Sarajevo, and we are starting the highway to Montenegro. We are building the high-speed railway to Hungary and continuing with the projects that will connect the entire region. In terms of energy, energy diversification obviously is one of the key priorities right now. Serbia is about to get the new government, and I can tell you today that whoever is going to be the prime minister in the new government, one thing is for sure, that the number one priority of the new government is going to be energy. Rethinking our energy mix, investing into energy diversification, and speeding up the green energy transition. It's going to remain a key, absolute key priority in the next 4 to 5 years. In that respect, again, region plays instrumental role, extremely important for all of us to increase our energy independence and energy sustainability. For us, Serbia, the most important project is gas interconnector to Bulgaria to connect to LNG terminals in Greece. And we have started building it in February this year with a huge support from the EU. As much as 50% of the entire project is financially covered by the EU, so I thank our friends and partners from the EU for that support. We are now thinking about the interconnector to North Macedonia and several other projects, as well as better connecting our overhead power lines, the transmission systems, in order to balance out the renewable energy much better and much cheaper. So it's best for our economies and for all of our citizens. But again, unless we have a better connected, stronger region, it will be more difficult and more expensive for all of us. Open Balkans. Economically, it's an enormously important project. If everyone from the world, from the Western Balkans joins the project, and I use this opportunity again to invite everyone to join, I think that can impact our economies by increasing our overall GDP by more than 7%. And that is incredible potential. That is really a unique opportunity. If we stay as we are right now between Albania, North Macedonia, and Serbia, it can go from 1 to 3%. But I do hope that others will recognize the potential and join the Open Balkans. I think it is also extremely important politically. Politically, because it will give a signal to our partners from the EU that we ourselves can do things which will be required of us once we join the EU, cutting the red tape, basically having a borderless Balkans, enabling free flow of people and goods and services and capital. And finally, and to me personally, the most important thing, it will show to the younger generations, to the youth in this part of Europe, that we today, as politicians, can create a different future for the Balkans, that we can influence things in the Balkans and can give to them a positive signal that there is something that they can hope for so that they stay here in the Western Balkans. Now, just briefly on the political issues that I've been able to hear here during the Prespa Forum, not the least yesterday during the presidential panel from the presidents also of some of the EU member countries. We have heard yesterday again that Serbia should not be surprised by now more and more people within the EU clearly stating that we cannot hope to become member of the EU without recognizing the independence of the so-called Republic of Kosovo. And I can tell you that, again, we have here the situation where we are changing the goalposts. And what we are hearing, including yesterday, for example, from President of Croatia, or what we heard in Serbia from the Chancellor of Germany, is very different from what we have in our official negotiating position with the EU. Here with me, I have official accession document, European Union common position, chapter 35, other issues, item number 1, normalization of relations between Serbia and Kosovo. And I will point to you that even in this official negotiating position adopted by the EU, when they say Kosovo, there is an asterisk, which says, and it's clearly spelled out, this decision is without prejudice to positions on status and is in line with UN Security Council Resolution 1244 and the ICJ opinion on the Kosovo Declaration of Independence. And basically what it says, the official position is, and I quote, Serbia remains committed to the EU-facilitated dialogue, engages in reaching further agreements in new subjects, furthering the normalization in good faith with a view to gradually lead to the comprehensive normalization of relations between Serbia and Kosovo, again with asterisks, in line with this negotiating framework. So, in the official position of the European Union, there is not a single word about the need to recognize Kosovo. It says the normalization, and it says that when they refer to Kosovo, it's in line with the UN Security Council Resolution 1244, meaning that Kosovo is an integral part of Serbia, and the UN Security Council Resolution 1244 speaks about territorial integrity of the Republic of Serbia in its internationally recognized borders. So again, it's not like Serbia is hearing something new. We have heard that from some of the partners, but never officially from anyone from the EU that it's going to be a request for Serbia to join the EU. If it is indeed a request, then this negotiating position needs to be changed. So we know what we're talking about, it's in the official documentation. I assume that will be kind of difficult because there are 5 EU member countries that do not recognize the Republic, or the so-called Republic of Kosovo. So it will be very difficult to change this negotiation position. But it's either this, or it's what we informally hear that we need to do to join the EU. And finally, I would like really to thank our friends and partners from North Macedonia for always having the most constructive of attitudes and for just sharing our thoughts and ideas about what the future of the Western Balkans is, and certainly that it is sooner rather than later part of the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Well, I was going to ask a follow-up question about open Balkans, but in some ways you already answered that in your remarks about why you've been such a strong advocate for it, and it does seem to be gaining momentum. On the other hand, there have been criticisms of open Balkans by some who say that it's unnecessary in the context of the Berlin process, or others who say actually that it's, there are other intentions behind it, mendacious intentions as some kind of foreign policy tool. But I think you've probably spelled out why you think it's important about taking ownership. And because you've raised this political question, I know this is a panel about economics, integration, but I think I should probably respond to what you've said, and I want to thank you for addressing it, because it's otherwise it's an elephant in the room, because it was raised yesterday. So thank you. So I suppose my response would be, okay, you're saying that this is a changing of the goalposts, and it's true that in the original, at the starting point of the negotiations, and also at the starting point of the dialogue between Serbia and Kosovo, the way in which it was addressed was very, I would say, ambiguous in terms of the language that was used, and probably deliberately so, as is the wont of the Commission and so on. And so now we come to a stage where actually that question has been now made more explicit for all sorts of reasons, and it's clearly the question of unresolved bilateral disputes is something hanging over not only Serbia and Kosovo, but other countries in the region. So I guess my question to you is it not therefore, to some degree disingenuous to think that you can really go further on the path to integration without actually trying to solve this question? And the same applies for others, that in the end everybody has a choice to make, and they are very, very difficult choices. Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay. So perhaps just a sentence or two on the open Balkans and the criticism that it's is contrary or against the Berlin process. So I would say it's 100% complementary with the Berlin process, because a lot of the agenda items that we have in the Berlin process have been basically, like connectivity agenda, have been basically adopted by the open Balkans process. And what adds value to the open Balkans process is that actually the partners are free to choose what initiatives they think are best for them and in their best interests. So those initiatives that they don't see as relevant to them, they can basically say no. But their no does not stop everyone else from implementing these initiatives. And actually, in all other regional frameworks, there has to be a consensus. So even a Berlin process, to a large extent, the CEFTA agreement, there is one party that can stop the entire process, thus inflicting a huge damage to the economies and the people of all of the rest of the countries. They can even stop some processes that have nothing to do with them. So, for example, we have experienced the stopping of the authorized economic operators for Serbia, between Serbia, if I'm not mistaken, Albania, and Moldova by Pristina, when it had nothing to do with that. But here, I think the advantage is that if someone doesn't like anything, does not think that it's in their best interest, they simply are not going to do it. And everyone else can. And then they can join later, or they can choose not to join at all. So I think there is a greater flexibility. And it is indeed a process which is driven by people from the Balkans. On this political issue, I have to say that, again, I think there is what we have in place is the issue of double standards. And to be perfectly honest, a whole lot of hypocrisy from some of the EU member states, as well as others, which is now more apparent than ever, and forgive me for saying that, but I think it needs to be said, more apparent than ever when we have a war in Ukraine. When we are swearing by, and Serbia agrees with that, and is fully in line with the EU position on that, swearing by the territorial and standing by territorial integrity of Ukraine. That is the #1 principle of the international law. And that is the sacred place of territorial integrity of internationally recognized countries, such as Ukraine, and also such as Serbia. But in 1999, and then again in 2008, that territorial integrity of internationally recognized country like Serbia did not really matter to a great many countries that today are protecting with territorial integrity of Ukraine with everything that they have. Again, and I think that is also very relevant, and it shows how complex this whole situation is. When I read the policy paper of G7 after their last meeting of their ministers of foreign affairs, dealing with all of the crises and all of the open issues currently in the world, in all of these, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and so forth, in all of these, they specify that in order to protect international peace, security, to enable stability, they're calling on all sides to fully respect the relevant resolution of the UN Security Council for that case. And only when they talk about the Western Balkans and Serbia, they never even mention the UN Security Resolution 1244, because all of the G7 members have breached the UN Security Council Resolution 1244. And that shows how complex this whole situation is. And I think that is what will further make our EU integration process more difficult, because at the end of the day, no one really wants to look themselves in the mirror and say, but listen, we have breached the territorial integrity of an internationally recognized country, and we don't know what to do with this precedent now. But we're going to fight for our territorial integrity politically, through negotiations, also, as #2, and I'm finishing with this, for the long-term normalization of relationship with Pristina, because that is what our future and economic future and the sustainable development depends on, and also our place in the EU. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for addressing that. Obviously, we could continue that discussion, but this is not probably the panel on which to do it. And we are running very short of time because we started late, and we have another second edition of this panel. So I would like now to turn to Secretary General of the Regional Cooperation Council, Mylin Dobregu. Welcome. And it would maybe help to speak from the seat, and I would just ask everyone now to keep their remarks short, and that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'll try to be as short as I can. So, dear Prime Minister, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear ministers, yes, a lot has been said from yesterday's panel, and you heard a lot as well from the previous distinguished speakers during this panel. And then here that my job and the role of the RCC enters in the stage. When I was invited, and I'm delighted to be again here a year after the PRESPA agreement of 2021, when I was invited for this panel, frankly, I have to admit to you that the first time that I read the title, it looked like that we are going to discuss about the Treaty of Rome. Well, it is something that I don't expect any of you to wish and look forward from at least myself to say. But at least from that Treaty of Rome and Rome itself, a lot of things can be said, and we can draw a parallel line with the Western Balkans. So I was thinking that maybe the right way to start this intervention might be that Rome was not built in one day, or then all ways leads to Rome, or then Rome started and it started to build itself from the ruins, and now it's like overwhelmed by its own splendor, and this can be like really fit for the European Union itself. But there is like a parallel in between how the Treaty of Rome started and what brought into the story of European Union, which is the European Economic Community. And that started as well with 6 countries of European Union at that time. And here we are, let's say, at the same moment of time when 6 countries of the Western Balkans, 6 economies came together to decide and build one area, one single market, one market for all of them together. This is definitely easier said than done. The process of, let's say, reintegration of the region of the Western Balkans and deeper economic integration among themselves, I hope will not take 35 years as it took for the European Union to build one single market. And given that time has a different value here in this region, none of us is really having any luxury to lose any single day anymore, while a lot of processes, like the most important one, that of European membership of the Western Balkans, has been stagnating for 4 years. But what can we take as lessons learned from this European Economic Community or from that first treaty? Because, as you know, Europe has been going through a lot of treaties. Some of those have brought a lot of changes, and some of those treaties as well, or developments like during the last 13 years, have been more like improvising something than bringing any great change. So what is this region trying to do? You heard a lot today about the initiatives of having one market, or different initiatives that are run into the region, like the Open Balkans initiative. We as RCC, we keep working with an ultimate goal of giving to the citizens of this region one single market for all. Why a single market is important? Everybody keeps saying that Western Balkans is a small region. Figures and data tell us that there are like, let's say, 18 million people living in here. But with the number and the level of those, the ratio of those leaving our economy since years, that number, I'm sure, is not more than like 15 or 16 million people. And out of those, for 75% of them, regional cooperation is of high value. And for more than 43%, unemployment is the biggest problem. And economic crisis as well follows that one. So in times of war, in times of pandemic, then the necessity of coming closer together is quite important. Last year when we were here in Prespa, it coincided with the first day of entering into force with the roaming agreement. That roaming agreement, it's not only like, let's say, an economic exercise that deepens the relations among countries or makes citizens pay less, but that as well is a political act that convinced us that whenever, even within all the sensitivities, the political sensitivities that are present in the region, whenever there is a decision from the leaders of the region, followed as well by a bottom-up approach from the citizens, to make things happen, those things will happen. And this is one of the ways how we see like approaching the European Union on the other hand. So we started with Rome free among ourselves, and now we are in the process of trying to reduce the roaming prices with Western Balkans. So it makes the process of trying to align with Western Balkans even more in practical terms and less like waiting for the membership day. Again, I have to say that the story of the common regional market and all the instruments that are used on that, on achieving that ultimate goal, it's not going to be a short one. It's going to take time, it's going to take years. But if we speak out of necessity, if we speak out of the pessimism that the people, and especially the youngsters in the region, while out of 3 of them is unemployed, feels in and would like to see that things that are happening in their own societies can really bring a change, then we must speed up and make like more concrete achievements in terms of the economic and deeper economic cooperation. I see, Joan, that you would like to stop me, although the story of the cooperation in the region is not as short as my intervention, But as last words, I have to say, like RCC, all other partners and international institutions, we have a role to coordinate and facilitate whatever the decision makers from the economies of this region will decide to bring forward. We can be hell-bent to help, to coordinate, to facilitate, but then it's up to them. They have the political mandate to exercise and then to meet whatever they promise to their citizens.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you first for your brevity, and thank you. Your message actually was really very clear. And so in the interest of time, I'm going to come to our final panelist for this section of the session and introduce Matteo Bonomi, who is a research fellow at the Institute of International Affairs in Rome. Over to you.
Thank you, Jan. I would like to focus my intervention on EU integration of the Western Balkans and misperception. I think there is a widespread misperception that the stalemate of enlargement policy has corresponded to an halt of integration. And I think from all intervention we hear today, we can see how it is not really the case. The Western Balkan countries are much more integrated today in the European Union than they were 10 years ago. This is evident in the economies of the region. Look at trade of Serbia, has more than doubled its volume in 10 years with the EU. But it's cross-sectoral in all aspects of the economics, and it's across political sector. Look at justice and home affairs. I mean, organizational cooperation through participation in EU agency has increased massively. Europol, Frontex. Indeed, upon the formal policy framework of enlargement, policy cooperation and intergovernmental cooperation has become the rule and not the exception. And the fact that this kind of intergovernmental cooperation has not happened as we learn from the Treaty of Rome, as we learn in history book about European integration, has not happened through law, but through mainly intergovernmental means, has not had the teleological focus of membership, and has been dealing, especially during the last 10 years, on unusual policy field of European integration that were mainly driven by the crisis, fiscal policy. I mean, we have to implement the same austerity policy here and in the EU, control of borders, so use of force, and so on. So everything good? I would say no, not at all. This kind of phenomenon has been described by political scientists in the EU as integration without supranationalization. And it's the same thing we are experiencing here with the region. And maybe it has been able to make EU survive the 15 years of crisis, but has big limits. Has big limits in terms of efficiency, accountability, and legitimacy. And this is particularly evident in EU relation with the Western Balkans. It is ineffective because this kind of economic integration does not trigger economic convergence, and we are actually diverging. We are diverging in economic standards, and we are diverging in political standards. It's unaccountable because it strengthens both within the EU, but especially in this region, the role of the executive. And it's not good when you need to consolidate institutions. And it's illegitimate because it put different countries, partner countries, cooperate on unequal feet. And we see how many vetoes are blocking this process. So where we go from now? I think the last two crises we have been facing within the EU have been different. At least have created more appetite within you for moving on and to more appetite for more supranational integration. And I think this really gives an opportunity to relaunch both deepening and widening through common institutions. This is true at the local level, at the national level, at the regional level, and the European level. We need institutions as the RCC, as the European Commission, to help us to manage the multiple interests that we have, and that simply the national government alone cannot represent, because we live in complex society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matteo. Well, another very clear message there. So we've come to the end of this part of the session. We will be swiftly moving on to the second part. So I'm asking all of you, first of all, to remain in your seats. Do not go away, because we have very important speakers. I think what we've heard from our distinguished speakers this morning is that much remains to be done, but we've also heard what I think is a core agenda, both for the region itself and for the EU institutions. And I guess one of the core messages that have really come through is the importance of the region actually taking responsibility and making things happen, taking ownership of the process. Which I think is actually, after many, many years of following the region, a very, very positive development. So please join me in thanking all the speakers. There's going to be a family photograph for you four now, and we'll have another one at the end of the second one, and a final one of everybody outside when the session is over. So please join me in thanking all our speakers. everybody to keep to their 5 minutes, because otherwise we will eat into the start of the next session. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Minister of Finance, Fatmir Bassimi, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I think we are here for the second year on this conference, which is actually one of an example of what is and what was a European initiative according to the topic 65 years ago. And from that perspective, I will try, and also in terms of the timing that we have according to the schedule, to be very, very focused, but some aspects we must address. Actually, talking about Europe as a project, European Union, 65 years ago and immediately after the Second World War, before the Treaty of Rome, was how to build peace through cooperation, mutual respect, and what is the mutual ground of opportunity for the future. And as we know from today, that was economic aspects, economic cooperation. And usually what we know how to build or reconciliation is usually going through the soft way, culture, sports, and this. And that was very unique at that point, but very ambitious and very realistic from today's point of view. There are many things that we can improve and we can criticize, but one thing that we must agree is that Europe brought peace in the continent. Europe integrated the market over this period of time. And we see how Europe is becoming better in terms of responding, I may say, COVID, although at the beginning it was a bit challenging in harmonizing the policies, and especially with supplying the vaccines at the time, but we learned from that, and now we have the challenges for the response of sanctions against Russia, an invasion. And we see that here in this respect, Europe is considering the Western Balkans as well. So this is good. Commissioner Varhey mentioned that as well. But the point now is, from this perspective, we see Europe becoming the largest market in the world with 500 million inhabitants, 24 million companies, 70 million of people, of European citizens working out of their native countries. So this is probably what has been the vision of founders of Europe at that time. So for our generation is to respond to the new challenges. So I cannot just talk about Europe, about just avoiding talking about the region. Europe and the region actually should be part of the European project, not just as a statement, but it's as an official policy that we are facing. But also, I have no doubt about the intention of Europe for the Western Balkans. But what we have to reconsider is the instruments that Europe has, and the flexibility and the creativity and approaching the challenges. So one goal that we have to take into consideration of a European project or European Union being complete in the European continent is having the Western Balkans and having it now. We see that what was unimaginable last year, we see it happening in European continent. It's happening classical war. You see in the field the scenes that has been in Second World War. So we have to be faster than these challenges coming in terms of the Western Balkans, in terms of the European project at all. So in this respect, on this very first address, I will stop here in terms of the positive sides of this European single market project or European Union, and how we can leverage from that, and how we can make from this experience best practices leverage for a response to the challenges that we have in terms of what is coming now, the new period of living within the crisis, a crisis after crisis, but also in terms of the challenges. So I'll put just 5 words at the end. The prioritization or the priority for the future that we have also for Europe and for the Western Balkans, it become general prioritization after the COVID and other crises, which is green transition, digitalization, connectivity for the region, human capital, but also good governance and corruption. So these are the 5 things that we should take into consideration for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister, for being so succinct and for your messaging being so clear. And what I propose is that I'm going to take each of the speakers, and if everybody replicates that, we actually might have, a few minutes at the end for questions, which is, would be very nice. So let's turn next to Goran Đurović, Minister of Economic Development and Tourism. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I would like to speak on Montenegrin, is it possible? Želim da vam se zahvalim, želim na pozivu I na ovoj
invitation and the excellent conference. That many things useful can be heard here. In order to speak of the current moment, we must go back of good examples in the past. The first I want to talk about is the EU. That is 2 years after World War II, negotiations started, and understanding that reconstruction must be done and past left in the past. 12 years after World War II, we have Rome. We have an agreement of the 6 countries of the EU, economic countries, and they understood then that we can be mad at each other, but not that much. We must cooperate. And the only path of cooperation is through economy. Economy brings people closer. The EU has proven that with a good example, because today, after 65 years, we have a stable European Union which has been built based on other cooperation, culture, medical, all segments that are significant for a society. And we can say very freely, with all the pitfalls and misunderstandings and incompliances with the EU, that is a system that functions well. Another example is in 1991, the Visegrad Group. At that time, some countries understood that they need to cooperate, and they wanted to be part of the European Union, and that's what happened. Their wish came true. They established a strong economical sphere, they strengthened the market, their economies, and as such, they joined the European Union, and that was not an obstacle to join. That was an advantage. That was a plus to be part of the EU. When we speak of the Western Union, of the Western Balkans, we speak of the same story. Only that story is 65 years after compared to the European Union story. It's up to us whether we keep talking and years fly by or we do something concretely. The same as the motive in the EU was in the Visegrad Group. Here we must have a motive which is economic cooperation. We must bring people together, connect them. Our borders must be more frequent and freer. Today we have situations that on our borders, especially during tourist season, people wait long. The flow of goods is slow. Losses for economies are huge. And speaking of cooperation, it's necessary and main prerequisite for development of the Western Balkans. When they say concretely in Montenegro, why don't have big production? We are few people in order to have you must have strong markets, strong companies in order to have strong production. Unfortunately, we don't have that. I think this is an opportunity for all of us, for all the countries of the Western Balkans, to have a market of 20 million people that is respectable market, and a market that has the strength and potential to generate new values, to create new companies that will be multinational companies. Why not from this region can we create multinational companies? And the answer to your key question, is Europe integrated after 65 years? My answer is, just like the Prime Minister Brnabić said, no. The answer is no. Why? Because there are no countries in the from the Western Balkans that are part of the EU. Yes, it's true. We must do everything. We must be prepared to join the EU to strengthen our economy and to meet all the criteria. And that's all right. But also it's necessary to have a good wish from the EU official representatives to welcome the Western Balkan countries in their family. I'm convinced. And listening to the respected Milanovic Prime Minister, President Pahor, and respected speakers, talking to many European representatives, I believe that such days not so far away when countries from the Western Balkan shall be equal right members of the EU. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister. So we're setting a good track record here on the on time. So I'd like to introduce now Minister of Economy Artane Rizvanoli. Welcome.
Dear colleagues, ministers, esteemed guests from throughout the region and beyond, it's a real pleasure to be here today for the second year in the Prespa Forum Dialogue. I think it's a great forum when we can exchange both ideas and, more importantly, challenges and how to overcome them together. Republic of Kosovo is fully committed and supports regional cooperation and the common regional market, which we see as a stepping stone and which we see as a stepping stone toward the EU single market and finally, ultimately, full membership of the countries in the region in the EU. We also believe that recognizing a common reality of what happened in Kosovo 23 years ago or what is happening in Ukraine today is extremely important, and we would like to see a region which is more unified in this respect, and we believe in regional cooperation which is based on one basic principle, which is equal treatment of all the partners, which is why we do not support the Open Balkans but rather and see no alternative to the common regional market process. The times such as these that we are living in, times of crisis, first the pandemic, then the post-pandemic failures in the supply chains, inflation, and energy crisis, which are all unfortunately being aggravated by the war in Ukraine and will likely become more difficult throughout the next winter and perhaps the next years. These have all made it very clear that regional cooperation is a must. In this respect, I would like to focus my intervention on energy. As we approach the coming winter, we know that energy is going to be a huge challenge for all of us in the region. And energy security, diversification, and sustainability are all very much intertwined together, as the war in Ukraine has particularly demonstrated. Therefore, I would like to focus my intervention on what we are doing as Republic of Kosovo, but also what we would like to see more from the partners in the region, and how we would like to strengthen cooperation in the region to help us address all our joint challenges in this respect. I think we need better planning and coordination in terms of both first energy balances and then jointly developing generating capacities in the future. In this respect, I'm happy to say that with the Republic of Albania, on Monday we will be signing an agreement paving the way for the first time for a joint energy balance between Republics of Kosovo and Albania. And we've already had initial discussions with Minister Bektashi of North Macedonia and hope that we will expand this initiative to North Macedonia and hopefully other countries in the region too in the future. The last winter has shown that our complementarities, particularly between some of our countries, can be very important in facing such crises, and they should be, and we should make better use of these in the future. For these, better planning is very important. Working interconnection lines are also a must in this respect. As Republic of Kosovo, we have quite developed system and connection with countries in the region. But unfortunately, Republic of Serbia does not allow for two transmission lines to be, for capacities in two transmission lines to be allocated commercially. Which leads to a welfare loss of 20 million euros per month for the region, and it's actually a huge challenge for generators in Serbia too. We hope that by next winter this issue would be resolved because it aggravates trade throughout the region, apart from being a violation of the Energy Community Treaty, and as has been pointed out also before, this trade is very important in order for all of us to be able to diversify our energy sources and to be able to integrate more renewable resources into our systems, which is, I know, a joint priority for the whole region. Another major area of cooperation is making use of the gas infrastructure that is being built in the countries around us, like Bulgaria, Greece, Northern Macedonia, Albania. For some of us, for some of the countries, some other neighboring countries, this is a means of, first of all, diversifying away from Russian gas and independence from Russian gas. For some others, like us in Albania, it's actually diversifying from other sources. We from coal, and Albania is blessed to have 100% renewable resources from water, but not enough energy security for this. We, as Republic of Kosovo, are very interested to make use of this infrastructure, and we see planning in the energy sector as increasingly a regional based one rather than the traditional view of having all the capacities built in the country. We think that we can benefit both time-wise and efficiency-wise, economic-wise, if we have joint capacities throughout the region, both for base load, but also for flexibility, and now increasingly it's becoming important to also have strategic reserves that are complementary throughout the region, and we think here that there is a lot that we can do, and we look forward to intensifying this cooperation. And finally, I think this whole intervention and the way I started it, I think goes to show that, in fact, the crises such as the ones that we are facing in recent years, pandemic, energy, aggravated by the war in Ukraine, I think they also represent opportunities, and they show how important it is to cooperate in the region, but also that it is a must, and I hope that this will be a chance that the whole region will use to accelerate regional cooperation. And also we very strongly believe that this should go hand in hand with democratization of the region, which along with rule of law are the basic principles and are key to increasing the welfares not only of our people and our countries, but also ultimately leading to the goal that we aspire, which is to creating the conditions and ultimately joining the European Union. So with this, I will end my intervention and hope to see in the following years more results, concrete results from this regional cooperation.
Thanks very much for that, Minister, and that was a really useful intervention on the energy issue, which is obviously a crucial one now for the region for reasons that we well know. So moving on, I would like now to introduce Emir Djikic, who is the Director for the Central European Free Trade Agreement, otherwise known to everybody as CEFTA. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'll try to stick in 3 minutes, thanking Ms. Melinda Bregu from RCCs, taking out a portion which we should say at the beginning as well. So, dear ministers, distinguished guests, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, last year, almost a year ago, we were sitting at the same place and we all agreed that the Western Balkan is the missing puzzle for completing Europe. In the meantime, the war in Ukraine has shown that there are other parts of the puzzle that still needs to be incorporated into the picture of the Europe. What we have agreed last year is the challenges that we are facing are calling for strengthening the economic relations and integration in the region. The cooperation between Western Balkans economies and the strong commitments that they made to contribute to the economic development. But now, those commitments are calling for the actions. There was a lot of promise in the last 3 years. We are now on the point to have to deliver something. It is crucial to keep the momentum of the tangible results that were achieved together and to unleash the growth potential by enhancing regional economic cooperation. 65 years from Rome is something that teaches us the common regional market is the replica of the economic union that was signed 65 years ago in Rome. So there is not too much to invent, or is just to implement. The vision of the EU-like single market that was set up in Sofia 2 years ago are giving us the ambitious agenda in front of us, aiming to further facilitate trade in goods, trade in services, in CEFTA, and develop new mechanisms to enhance trade among the parties. One good news is last year we have discussed the need to extend the green lanes to the EU member states, as the green lanes have the positive impact on the entry in, or on the beginning of the pandemics 2 years ago and have enabled the sufficiency of the population of the Western Balkans by providing supply of the necessity goods in the region. Today we can probably inform you that in Thessaloniki on the 7th July we will have the first green lanes extension towards Greece as agreed between the North Macedonia and Greece, and it will be followed by the CEFTA EU blue lines that would be signed 9th of September in Bari between Albania, Montenegro and Italy. We are calling up to other neighboring member states to join the initiative and try to assist us to have the flow of the goods to the markets where we are exporting 65 to 75% of our goods. And it's impossible to get into the value chains with the Europe as if your truck's gonna wait for day 2, 3 on the borders between the Western Balkans and European Union. World Bank said last year that 6.7% would be the growth, the potential growth, if we implement the reforms and implement the common regional market. This was planned for the post-pandemics. Sadly, after the post-pandemics, we had another crisis coming up, not even half a year after it. But this still represents a potential and untapped growth which we have and can do, gradually removing the obstacles that are creating difficulties for goods, people, capital, and services to go around in the Western Balkans. That's, as somebody mentioned already, the syntagma easier said than done. The devil advocate would say so, but it is not easy, but it's feasible, and it's doable. Our job in CEFTA is often based just to coordinate a bit the work, to align the EU harmonization, and provide mechanisms to get the benefits to the economies and the economic operators in the region. In our pipeline, we have more than 30 such regional mechanisms that are technically negotiated and prepared and that are related to different kinds of businesses: industry, agriculture, big exporters, small online shops, goods, services, labor-intensive, you name it. Everything is covered there. And there we are coming to one of the messages. Unfortunately, we missed the political support to finalize most of these measures. So the tremendous expert work that was provided in the last couple of years are not providing to the benefits, are not translating to the benefits to the population and to the economic operators and companies in the region. Therefore, I'm using the opportunity to reiterate the importance of accomplishing the regional agenda and to call upon all the CEFTA parties to invest more efforts in the delivering of the CRM. The benefits for companies, people, for the economy in general, investments, name it, should be prioritized over the political challenges and should be the first priority for all of us together. The sooner we start delivering, the closer the EU single market will be to us. And this is reaffirmed by the Economic and Investment Plan. The EU is heavily mentioning it. Fulfill something in the region, we will open you the single market in those areas. The EU values and the contribution of us to EU values. As said last year, we are the puzzle of the Europe, and this puzzle should complete the European Union, should be done with inclusive regional integration and European integration that are just two names of the same coin.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. So now, last but by no means least, I would like to introduce Eric Nelson, a diplomat, former ambassador to Bosnia and Herzegovina, and now Associate Director at the George C. Marshall Center for Security Studies in Germany. And it's nice to have a perspective from the US.
Thank you, Joan. Good morning, everyone. I'd first like to express my gratitude for the opportunity to participate in this distinguished forum. At the George C. Marshall Center, which is a German-American partnership, engagement in the Western Balkans is one of our top priorities. A discussion of European integration, I think, should go back 75 years. It was 75 years ago that Secretary of State George C. Marshall proposed the European Economic Recovery Plan, which we all refer to as the Marshall Plan. And the Marshall Plan is famously helped Europe rebuild from the ashes of World War II. But most important is the plan's role as a catalyst for European integration. A decade before the Treaty of Rome, the plan required the participating European countries to coordinate their plans for the resources, and to set up the forerunner of the OECD to accomplish that. Now, many nations declined the invitation to participate in the Marshall Plan, including the region of the Western Balkans. So there's a lot of catching up to do. And in the last 30 years, the Marshall Center in the U.S. and the institutions that have evolved from the Treaty of Rome have been working hard at continuing the Marshall Plan's mission of building institutions that will support our shared values for peace, freedom, human rights, democracy, and opportunity. Because the United States vision for Europe is the same as for the Western Balkans, and it's the same that was expressed in the Marshall Plan. And that is a region at peace with itself and its neighbors, and a region that is stable, prosperous, and integrated into the European and Euro-Atlantic framework. At the forum, we've heard a lot about the shared values, shared European values, shared support of these universal values, how deeply and broadly these values are supported in the Western Balkans. We see the support as well in the Ukraine and in Belarus, which Vladimir Putin clearly sees as a threat. And the horrendous attack of Russia on Ukraine underlines the necessity that integration proceed and that the Western Balkans nations expeditiously undertake political and economic reforms necessary to move from, not just from shared European values, but to shared European standards. And economic integration provides ample opportunity for this. Robust and inclusive regional initiatives based on EU rules and regulations, like the Open Balkan Initiative and the Common Regional Market, are foundational to energizing the economies of the Western Balkans and moving the region closer to the EU as its single market and to eventual membership. And the United States supports both initiatives as complementary to deepening regional economic cooperation and progress on the European path. For initiatives like these to succeed and successfully seize the moment and truly transform the region as an investment destination, the initiatives must be transparent, unified, and demonstrate concrete, quantifiable successes. Because in the economic realm, investors see the clear difference between values and standards. Transparency is essential, that agreements be negotiated openly and inclusively and flexibly to welcome additional members participating. Unity is essential to project the certainty to investors that this region is worth investment and that the Western Balkans is creating new opportunities. And when we talk about quantifiable, concrete successes, we've heard this morning about yet the many opportunities that are available from energy, from harmonized customs procedures, from coordinated infrastructure projects that project this region as an integrated area for investment. The United States also is clear-eyed that domestic limitations to progress must be addressed as well, and chief among these are unchecked corruption and weak rule of law. These both discourage investors, and these both drive the crippling brain drain. And sadly, there's a direct negative correlation between the level of corruption and the weakness of rule of law and the strength of foreign direct investment and the strength of the brain drain. The EU has committed billions to integration opportunities, to opportunities for connectivities in this region. What's essential is greater local ownership. The EU must remain the lodestar for the Western Balkans. The United States acknowledges that the reality that 6 independent countries may implement the same reforms at a different pace according to each one's national priorities, and that consensus can slow progress. But we know that the broader the participation, the greater the growth will be in regional prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. I would like to thank all of you for your discipline, the most disciplined panel yet, I think. Maybe we should expect that from finance and economy ministers and directors of various kind, ambassador. And I also think that the clarity of your messages came through as a result. I would have loved to ask you some follow-up questions, but I'm afraid we started the whole session at half an hour late, and we've ended half an hour late, and we must not keep Minister Osmani waiting, he's making our host, the keynote speech in the next session. So I will end the session here. I think that is sensible. And thank you once again. Please join me, everybody, in thanking all our speakers in the panel. And please stay on the stage for a family photograph. And there will be another one outside with the panelists from the first part of the session. Thank you.